2024 season has been a nightmare for Sergio Perez, and the last race in Mexico was perhaps the worst for the Mexican driver. Coming into the race, Perez was hoping to get on the podium once again for Red Bull, but the weekend had other plans in store for him. After the Mexican Grand Prix, Red Bull seems to be done with Checo. For the Mexican Grand Prix, Sergio Perez had given himself a very ambitious task to get on the podium. He knew that his season so far has been terrible and he needed to revive his form. Perez admitted that he has had a terrible season this year, but is looking to turn things around at his home race. I know I've had a terrible season, so if I can get a strong result, it can change my season. If I get a good one here, my season can definitely take a U-turn. We can't unlock the full potential of the car. We are trying different things. In terms of where he was expecting to finish, Perez had only one answer: the podium. But as the weekend started, Perez's pace was nowhere near the front of the field. Right from qualifying, Checo failed to deliver. He got knocked out of Q1 after going only 18th fastest. Although Perez was starting at the back end of the grid, Red Bull and the Mexican fans were positive that he would be able to recover, given that the RB20's race pace was good enough to get into the points. But Sunday's Grand Prix proved otherwise. Sergio Perez had a decent start as he made up 4 positions. However, this hard work was undone as he got a 5-second penalty for starting the race outside his grid spot. He stopped his RB20 slightly but noticeably ahead of his spot and left the FIA no choice but to penalise him. He then spent the rest of the race battling against midfield and backfield teams such as VCARB, Sauber, Williams and Aston Martin. His battle with Liam Lawson in the VCARB was one of the highlights of the race. Perez was attacking Lawson on lap 15 when both the drivers were a bit too close for comfort. Lawson ended up successfully defending his position, but this battle costed Perez some damage and tyre wear. He had to pit the next lap for a fresh set of tyres, but this didn't help his race at all. Perez ended up finishing 17th in the race, and since there were 3 retirements during the race, 17th was the last position. There is no doubt that the Red Bull bosses will be very disappointed with Perez's performance at his home race. With high podium hopes for the Mexican, Perez finished last. This has added more doubt on his future with the team. There has been a lot of rumours suggesting that Liam Lawson is preparing to replace Perez at Red Bull next year. There is no doubt that Perez's performance have cost Red Bull the Constructors' Championship this year. Right now, Red Bull sits 3rd behind McLaren and Ferrari. Max Verstappen is still leading the Drivers' Championship, but with Perez all the way down in 8th, it doesn't do Red Bull any good. After the race, Christian Horner was asked if Perez would be part of the team for the rest of the season. To this he said, "Look, it's a performance-based business. There comes a point in time that difficult decisions have to be made." Although Christian Horner didn't directly mention it, it looks as though he is not keen on having Perez finish the rest of the season itself. But when Perez was asked if this could be his last time racing in his home race, he said, "I'll be here next year and I will try to go for victory because that is my dream." Perez seems confident that he will continue with Red Bull next year and will even win the 2025 Mexican Grand Prix, but he's not getting the practicality of the situation. Last year, Checo finished 2nd in the championship. One of the reasons for this was that the RB19 was so dominant that the other teams had no chance of beating them. But this year has been a completely different story. Although the RB20 was strong to start with, McLaren and Ferrari started to catch up after just a couple of races. Max Verstappen's last race win came at the Spanish Grand Prix, which was 4 months ago. But Verstappen has still been able to stay close to the front of the field. But for Red Bull to win the Constructors' Championship, they need both their drivers racing at the front. Perez is not fulfilling this demand. In 2025, the Austrian team will be facing an uphill battle as McLaren and Ferrari are clearly faster than them now. Both teams will also have a strong lineup next year, McLaren with Piastri and Norris, Ferrari with Leclerc and the 7-time champion Lewis Hamilton, who will be joining the prancing horses after this season. Red Bull will need to come up with a solution to challenge these teams. Perez is clearly not the solution, so who is? Liam Lawson was chosen to replace Daniel Ricciardo at VCARB ahead of the United States Grand Prix. After just 2 races, it's safe to say that Lawson has a future in F1. In Austin, the New Zealander started the race in 19th after taking on a grid penalty for additional power units. He ended up finishing 9th in his first race back in F1, This was more than impressive. In Mexico, Lawson was running a strong race after his teammate crashed on lap 1, but the damage he suffered while battling Colapinto had him drop down the field. He still finished ahead of Sergio Perez. Helmut Marko, Red Bull's chief advisor, has often praised Lawson's talent and has favoured him to replace Perez as soon as possible, so we could see a Kiwi driving the RB21 alongside Max Verstappen next year. But could he replace Perez even sooner? It is definitely a possibility. Do you think Red Bull should keep Perez in the RB20 for the remainder of the season? Post your thoughts in the comment section below.